Educated Economist here. So in this video, we are going to be discussing the profound changes that will be coming to the monetary policy considering the new Fed chairman, Warsh, who is going to come into the Federal Reserve of all these amazing, profound regime change, and we all try to figure out what it is that's going to happen there. Many articles, many news agencies are out there talking about what it is that's going to happen to the Federal Reserve and how the interest rate setting policy of the Federal Reserve is going to have this major change to it, considering the new Fed chairman, Warsh, is Donald Trump's major pick for this position. Now, when I think about what it is that's going to be happening with monetary policy, things don't really change for me, considering what it is that we have been talking about on this channel for quite some time now. And looking at and focusing in on the neutral interest rate has been the key indicator of how it is the Federal Reserve is going to be conducting themselves. Now, I know a lot of people do not know much about the neutral interest rate, nor does a lot of the Fed watchers out there communicate about the neutral interest rate, but it is by far the most important part of the monetary policy, or at least the understanding of the monetary policy coming from the Federal Reserve. Because without the understanding of the neutral interest rate, then you're just assuming that the powers that be are literally creating an environment in which that you can suffer pain from, while the powers that be that have acquired assets are then essentially saying, hey, we're trying to do something about this problem that we are experiencing. And then everybody gets real confused about it. And I think to myself, man, does anybody get what's going on out there when this is sort of the behavior that is being conducted out there with the mainstream media and the supposed information delivery system that has taken place? It doesn't make sense. None of it does. And so when you start looking at it from the credible threat theory, everything starts to line up. So everything that I have shared here on this channel, I have put out onto the internet in many ways, many shapes and forms and ideas, in order for people to then get the information themselves so that they can understand it. But really, the information never changes. It's always the same. It's just delivered and trying to deliver it in different ways. But I don't change the way it is that I look at this stuff. For years now, I have looked at the Federal Reserve and the inflationary scenario that they are experiencing as a gift to them. They were looking for it, they needed it, they wanted it, and they got it. And anybody who is seeing it any differently than that is really misunderstanding how it is that the Federal Reserve was literally getting ammunition back when they had the interest rates elevated with the inflation expectations. It was an absolute savior to the Federal Reserve. Many people won't realize that. They don't see it, they don't know it, but that is definitely what happened. Now, if you just go on Google for yourself things like the makeup strategy or Lael Brainerd and opportunistic reflation, and you're going to find all the evidence yourself that prior to COVID, the Federal Reserve was looking, hoping, dreaming, and praying for inflation, and they got it. Now, understanding that this inflation and the inflation expectation has risen the neutral interest rate, that makes the economy so less restricted for a group of people out there. Not for us, but for the upper 10, 20% of people. Now, when you think about it in this fashion, we have this resilient economy, booming economy they talk about. And I look around and I say, yeah, for those who can consume, those people are booming. Those guys are doing quite well. But everybody else is suffering the consequences from it. Now I think to myself, what is it that Warsh could possibly do? Like, I mean, we got Warsh versus Powell. What is Warsh going to bring to the Federal Reserve that's going to have this profound change? Anything? I mean, is he going to lower the interest rates below the neutral interest rate to stimulate the economy while an inflationary scenario is taking place? Does that seem like to make sense? I don't know how many people would think that would make sense. Maybe it does. I don't know. But when I think about what it is that the Federal Reserve has said from the past, in that if a neutral interest is closer to the Fed funds rate, they can have an economy that is far less restricted than anybody could ever consider it, with an unemployment that is still somewhat low, even though it is weakening. This is like the sweet spot for the Fed. I don't know how many people see it that way, but essentially this is what they were asking for, and now it's delivered. Why would Warsh change that? I'm not understanding. Why would he screw that up for? Here it is. The Federal Reserve has elevated Fed funds rate, which is essentially them getting their ammo back, because if the Fed funds rate was at zero, there's no monetary adjustment. Right? They can't adjust monetary policy if they're at the lower bound of zero. So if they're elevated with the Fed funds rate, that's their ammunition. Why would they give that up? Does it make sense to give it up? Does it make sense to give it up when you have a booming economy? Does it make sense to give it up when you have a relentless consumer? It doesn't make sense at all to give that up. I mean, everything seems to be hunky-dory for quite a few people out there, just not 80% of them. See, when you recognize this as the actual economy that is happening, because we are a consumer-based economy based on debt issuance, the people who borrow that money and buy cash flowing assets are doing incredibly well. It's everybody else who is suffering the consequences from this. How is Warsh going to possibly change that? I mean, is there something that he could do that is going to all of a sudden make that not be the case? Is he going to all of a sudden come in and say, hey, the money printing scheme has run its course and we're going to then be in a fiscal responsible government. We're going to force the fiscal responsibility of the government by not buying into these bonds, and we are going to unwind our balance sheet down to historically low levels, pre-great financial crisis type era. So does any of that sound like it makes sense? No. That's not the way he works. Doesn't matter. Maybe he that works that way. That's not the way the Fed works, right? See, the Federal Reserve has a federal open market committee that votes on monetary policy. They have but one goal: keep the banks liquid. That's it. Because if somebody wants a loan, there needs to be a loan out there. They want to keep these banks functioning. That's it. Anything else beyond that is really, I can't find any other goal. Now, do people look at that and take full advantage of it? Absolutely, they do. Holy moly, do people take advantage of that situation? They know exactly how to place themselves. They know exactly where to go to. They know what networks to establish. They can take full advantage of that situation. Most people have no idea that they can even do it. Right? And so here it is. We have a system in which that you have a working class individual who doesn't really need to know all that deep details within the banking structure in order to conduct themselves. They can just go get a good job and then everything will be fine until it's not. What can Warsh do about bringing good wages back to the American people? How do you bring production and savings back to the American people when the standard of living is so high they can't compete against the foreign producers? How do you do that? You can't. That's the thing. You can't. I hear Bostic talking in the interview saying that, well, you know, what we really need to do is show the American people essentially where the good tech jobs are going to be and give them the skills to compete for those jobs. And I'm thinking, did you just honestly just say that? I mean, here it is. He's in an interview talking about a K-shaped economy, describes the K-shaped economy, says he can't see it getting any worse, and then talks about how it is that the American people need to figure out the new skills for the new economy and then compete for wages. And I'm thinking, even if they got a good job, it ain't going to work. To believe that the K-shaped economy is not growing ever increasingly in divide is very naive. Because he doesn't have an actual chart to prove it doesn't mean it's not happening. Right? This is amazing times that we live in, guys, and I think about what it is that the leadership has provided for us, and I think that ain't leadership. That ain't leadership at all. In fact, if you look at it as leadership, they will lead you right into the abyss. They're wanting you to get good skills so that you can compete for your wages. Think they didn't. Bostic didn't say, "Hey, we got to figure out a way to get these people into a understanding of becoming asset holders. No, he says that you need skills so that you can compete for your wages. Really? See, this is the backwards world we live in, man. There ain't no way that that wage is ever going to be enough to make it. If you're not becoming an asset holder, securing a decent rate of interest beyond that of your occupation, you're going to be left behind. And Bostic knew that. He knows it. If I know it, he knows it. And I went to a play last night. I went and saw what the Constitution means to me. I didn't know what the play was about. It was really good. It was acted out very well. It was essentially one giant monologue. It was huge. The lady who did it was awesome. She did a great job of it. I was a little disappointed. I'm not going to get too much into it, but at the end of the play, essentially everybody in the audience had a similar, I don't know if it was everybody, and I don't think it was everybody, but a good fair amount of the people in the audience had agreed or somewhat was in approval of the abolishing of the Constitution. Kind of broke my heart a little bit. You know, I thought about it for a second. I'm like, man, the fact that you guys are even up here having this play, discussing this matter, and all the topics they brought up within it, literally was protected by the Constitution. I was proud to see it happening. But then to see them so naively disregard it, it was sad. It broke my heart. I thought to myself, you know, at least I know my rights. I know my constitutional rights. I can spit out the Bill of Rights. I've memorized them. I've internalized them. I've thought about them. Now I came to the conclusion that the only person who can protect your rights at the time that they're being infringed is you. At the time they're being infringed. There's nobody else who's going to come protect your rights. There's nobody else out there who can conduct you in a way that can protect your rights. Only you can do that. You have to know how to speak, when not to speak is super important. Silence is golden. And to think that you're going to give this thing up so that you can get some health care as a right, and didn't know that was a right. Yeah. I didn't even know police protection was a right. Like, what if they can't do it? Can I sue them? That doesn't make any sense to me. The only person who can protect me, I don't know what these coming to. I really don't. When I saw that happening last night and I saw what people were thinking, I don't know if it was all of them, but it was a fair amount. And I thought, man, you guys have no idea what you're giving up. Don't give up your ability to protect yourself. Don't give up your ability to defend yourself. Don't give up your ability to speak your mind. Don't give these things up. I mean, the first two amendments to the Constitution are so important. I don't understand why people would want to give these things up. Right? The freedom of speech, to be able to say whatever you want, whenever you want, to whoever you want. Obviously, you can't scream fire in a theater, right? Can't do that. But you can give your opinion. You can say whatever it is you want, so long as it's not a threat. Your opinion doesn't, your opinion hurting other people's feelings is not your problem. That's their problem. And if you hurt other people's feelings from your statements, they shouldn't listen. Stop listening to you, right? That's what they should do. But people who listen and they get upset because their feelings got hurt from the things that you said, well, you're not willing to protect yourself. You're not willing to not listen. You want to listen, you want to get mad, and then you want to sue, saying, hey, you hurt me, all right? What in the world? Is this really the world that we live in? What if it is that you go to call the cops and the cops don't get there in time? Can you sue them because they failed to protect you? Like, what is this world that comes to in which that you are forcing other people to behave? Since when do we do that? See, here in America, we live by freedoms. And if I choose to not do anything at all, that's my choice. But if you're telling me that I have to do it, well, what kind of world do we live in? What if I do it? People say you got health care as a right. And I'm thinking, that doctor is required to give you medical treatment? Like, I can do carpentry. Am I required to build a house because I know how? Well, what if I like you? I might build you a house. But that guy over there, I don't know who he is. Why would I build that guy a house? That doesn't make any sense to me to build that guy a house. I don't know who he is. I don't know. I don't like him. Right? I mean, it's not that I don't like him, but it's not like I like him. I don't know who he is. Why would I do it? But if you paid me, well, I'll be more than happy. Right? Because being paid, being reimbursed for your skills, being reimbursed for your knowledge and abilities, see, that's really freedom. For you to be able to take your abilities and skills and go out there into the world and get what it is that you need. And sometimes you can get really good at it and you can get all that you need. But can you imagine living in a world that says, nah, you got too much? Even though you're really, really, really good at what you do, you're just going to get the same amount as everybody else who's doing essentially the same thing you're doing, even though they don't do it as good as you. What kind of world is that? That sucks. I wouldn't live in that world. But apparently, that's fair. Interesting times, right? We're moving into an era in which that it doesn't matter if you have skills or not. You can have the best skills in the world. It ain't going to provide you with anything. I mean, it'll provide you with a little bit. I shouldn't say nothing. But it's not going to provide you with what it is that you think it is. Not in today's economy, with the deterioration of the working class individual moving closer and closer to the abyss and the wedge of inequality being driven, and the people in power are literally saying, hey, you need to level up your skills so you can compete for wages. It's going to work. This isn't going to happen. Right? So can you imagine what it is that is going to happen then? You got a lot of people who start suffering and pain and misery, and they know that's what's going to happen. They're going to start doing things that are going to be very odd in an attempt to try and save the economy. People are going to beg for it. They're going to look for it, and they're going to ask for it. UBI kind of payments and stuff, they're going to be like, oh man, this is the greatest thing in the world, only to find that those UBI payments are going to drive the wedge of inequality even worse. See, some people are going to be smart about it. They'll secure a rate of interest beyond that of their occupation with it, but most people are just going to blow it on a good time. And they're going to say, oh, we can finally relax a little and live in our decent apartment and drive a newer car and, actually have a decent existence out here. And they're going to be very appreciative of the UBI payments. And other people are going to be like, I ain't increasing nothing. I ain't spending any of this on any extra stuff out there or luxury, and I'm going to dump every dime of it into an asset that pays me over time. And those people will separate themselves from everybody else. That's what will happen. And people will look 20, 30 years down the road from that, and they'll be like, why is the inequality so way worse than it was? We thought it was bad then. Now look at it. And then people will review the Uneducated Economist videos going, God, that guy really just relentlessly would not shut up about the Cantillon effect, would he? And now look at it. I just caught this comment. It says, wait, Simon said something about UBI. Simon is certain of UBI payments. Uh-huh. Oh yeah. It may not be called UBI and it may not necessarily, be universal, but it's going to happen. They're going to force feed a consumer. They have to. Otherwise, you're going to fall away. Right? And that's the problem that we're facing right now is that the working class individual can get a raise, but they won't become the consumer. Like the consumer isn't at the bottom of 50% of household incomes. Right? The next 30% and beyond the 50 to 80%, they do a little bit of consumption. And then the top 20% do like 70% of all the consumption that's being done out there. There is no hope for the bottom 50%. You are done. If you are not moving quickly, dramatically up into a asset holding position, leveling up your skills to try and get more money, to figure out one way or another in order to prevent from getting into debt or paying that debt off, that's if you're not doing that, actively doing that, if you're following further and further down the line, it's going to get ever increasingly harder. The UBI payments are the power of the B attempt to try and prevent that outcome. But it's not going to work because what they will it will work in the initial days. That's what I should say. But it's not going to be everlasting, and that's the problem. Like people go back and they look at hey, look at what Roosevelt, look at all these, Great Depression, look at all the, stuff that they did after that to try and pull the economy out and stuff. Like it was like all these things that they talked about from the past. Which one of them was last? None of them, because they don't last. They're all temporary, including the UBI, because eventually it'll get absorbed into the economy and the equilibriums will be found. Now, if you start injecting brand new money into the system, this is going to work out really well, especially if you hand it right to the people at the bottom. Like if you give it to the poorest people first and it's just like, here's UBI injections, right? And you start firing up the printing press and you hand it to these people, they are going to thank you so much for it. They're going to be like, awesome. Finally, look at me. I'm paying bills. I'm awesome. Right. And they got this UBI payment. And everything is going to look really good at first. I mean, just look at any UBI test. Right. Like we took this group of people and we gave them UBI payments and they told us it was really awesome. So, yeah, UBI works, right? Of course you did. You segregated a bunch of people and you gave them UBI, segregated basic income. Of course, those people loved it. You gave them a bunch of bonuses, right? That isn't the way universal works, right? But if you give all these people at the bottom, segregated people, right? People under a certain wage or whatever, a certain tax bracket, you give them a whole bunch of this UBI payment. What do you think they're going to do with it? I mean, what do you think they would do? They're going to spend it. They're going to spend it all. And when they spend it, where do you think it goes? All right. I mean, if you don't have it, who does? So anytime you ever inject new money into the system, it may take a minute, may not take very long at all, right? But it will all find its way to the top every single time, right? Because if you don't have it, somebody does, and that's where it goes. And so to think, okay, well, if you have all this money injection over these years that has separated the rich from the poor, and the poor are falling further and further and further away, what is it that the powers that be could possibly do in order to create an environment in which that they don't get hurt? Because remember, the last thing you're going to do is shoot yourself in the foot, right? So you got to think, like, what is the rich elite going to do? As long as they have theirs, everything's cool, right? They will do whatever they need to help you out so long as they have theirs. Because the moment that they get hurt, sorry, we got to take care of ourselves first and then we'll help you out. But you at the end of the line, you're going to have to hope and wish and pray that, the people at the top continue to get theirs, because if they don't, you're going to suffer as well. Isn't that sad to think? I know, right? It's not me thinking that way. It's just the way it is, right? I mean, obviously it is my way I'm thinking, but it's not me inventing that. That's the Cantillon effect. It's just the way it works. What could Warsh possibly do? Nothing, man. This guy is like, all the talk, all the headlines, all the even communications about it out there is just a complete waste of time. It doesn't change anything about the neutral interest rate. Doesn't change anything about how it is that the Federal Reserve positions the Fed funds rate in relation to that neutral interest rate. None of that shit changes. All right. Watch the bond market in the coming 2 months. Crap rolls downhill. This is sad state of affairs. Don't feed the wildfire. Cigarettes, booze, drugs, and tattoos. Yeah, they can't take your tattoos from you, so just take out debt and buy tattoos. And then when they come to repossess it, I mean, what are you going to do? Yeah. All right. Outstanding debts will suck up most of it. JP Morgan won't allow interest rate limits. Will tooth and nail. I was watching another video on YouTube with AI expert Tristan Harris. He talked about UBI and how those who control AI will be even more influential in the government, preventing increase in their taxes. Uh, I'm not sure, like, the whole point of taxes anyway, guys. Like, I think about this. If you taxed 100% of the people's income and 100% of corporate profit, you still would not be able to cover the unfunded liabilities of Social Security and Medicare. So I'm not sure what the point of even taxing is anymore. It's just really to take your time from you. That's it. Taxes are about taking your time. USA propaganda is so silly. We believe we are the best system, so it must be. Well, Kirk, I mean, I can't think of a system that matches it, so it's just like, is it the best? I don't know if it's necessarily the best, but there's nothing else, so what are you going to do? I mean, people are like, what do you mean there's nothing else? Of course, you can use Bitcoin and gold and silver, and then you have to understand the economic forces that come from that. And if you live in a country like the United States where we import more than we export, what you're going to do is you're going to import all your stuff and export all your gold. But if you don't do that, what you're going to do is fall into pain and misery because nobody's going to have a high standard of living after that. So there are other systems, no doubt about it. You're just going to have to know how to conduct yourself inside of it because it's going to be a miserable experience here in the United States to go back on the gold standard. Like, it would be horrible for everybody, well, except for those who have gold and silver. Those people who understand it and know how to, like, get through the downturn, the horribleness of it, and then invest on the other side. Those people are going to be killing it. They are going to do quite well. But it's going to be a lot of pain and misery if you don't know how to conduct yourself through that downturn, through the depression. Right? What are you going to do? Spend all your gold and silver while you're in the depression so you can eat or something, and then at the end of it be having nothing? No, you got to hold on to that the entire time, dealing with the horridness of a depressionary event, and then get through the collapse of the economy so that once you're on the other side of it, you can use your gold and silver to invest. I don't know how many people know that, but most people are like, you're using gold and silver to survive. Who's going to buy it? And I'm like, I don't know. I ain't using it for that. You know, like that's not my plan. All right, my plan is if there's a collapse, I'm going to carry it to the other side as best I can. I don't know how many people know that. Right? Other people might think they're going to try and, use it to get through like a survival technique or something. That's dangerous. I didn't know teachers and doctors work for free. Who knew? Yeah, right. Simon, will UBI be the last stage of the crisis for solution, which leads to the implosion of the economy or reordering of society and like other post-crisis? I don't know. No. The thing is like, if the problem that we faced in the past with so many crisis situations is that there was literally nothing that could be done to change the situation. Like if you ran out of gold, what happens? You fall. All right. If you can't make the payment, you collapse. If there's more debt than there is gold to pay it, then you have a collapse. It's going to happen every single time. And it happened quite a bit. Business cycles would run through the economy and destroy a lot of hardworking people and families and all kinds of stuff. Because literally there was nothing you can't print up money if you're on a gold standard, right? You're limited. Like there is a way you can kind of go into debt, but you're very, very limited on it. And if, you run too much of it, then you collapse. Having a system like we have today is not a good one, right? Like, I mean, like good or bad, I don't know. Like that to me doesn't make any sense. It's neither a good or a bad thing. It's just an is, and you have to understand how it is working because to think of it as being a good or a bad thing is really giving it, an expectation that it really doesn't deserve. It's a situation in which that people have a very difficult time understanding, and then they feel the pain and suffering on it because there's other people out there who really understand it and do quite well at it. Yeah. But that's going to be any economy, anytime. I mean, you look through history, inequality is not new, right? In fact, it's always been generally much worse than it is now. You think about it, really, the American people are dealing with a pretty luxurious experience. I mean, I see homeless people. I'm not saying that homeless people are enjoying a luxurious experience, but I see them on cell phones and drinking beer and stuff like that. It's just like there's people in this world who really suffer with homelessness, who really suffer in poverty. Like that, it don't look like that. It looks way, way worse. So here in the United States, we're actually enjoying quite a luxurious experience, even if it doesn't feel that way. You know, I mean, you just again look at some of the homeless people out there and how it is that they can conduct themselves. This is like places in the world that wouldn't. No, that's not a thing. Is it the last stage? I doubt it. I mean, UBI, tokenization, negative interest rates. There's so much. There's so much that can be done going into the future. And I don't like approve of any of it. It's just, shit, it's just going to happen. I mean, do you really honestly think that the people who are in power are going to figure out ways to keep it going? Or are they going to figure out ways to say, well, that was it? off into the collapse we go. No, of course not. They're going to try and figure out ways to keep it going. And the only thing about that is that if they keep it going, it's going to be them moving up higher up the ladder and then figuring out a way for all you to get new skills to compete for wages. That's what Bostic's suggestion is. I mean, that's the Fed like, that's probably the best that they could offer anyway. Right? It's just like, hey, we can recognize where it is that the new skills are going to be needed for the economy and then suggest that you go and get some education in that. And that's the best that they have to offer you. Think about that. That sucks. They didn't offer you up like, hey, you should be very much paying attention from an early age on what it means to have the Cantillon effect taking place so that you can secure a decent rate of interest beyond that of your occupation. No, what they suggest is that you get an education so you can level up your skills to compete for wages. That's let me see if I can find it. I love it was so good. Let me see if I can bring it up here. I'm kind of annoyed by Bostic. And we're talking about Warsh, but anyway. If you guys haven't joined the school community, you really ought to. The UE University is going to be one of the greatest places that you can go to in order to get an education on the monetary policy from a working class point of view. I I don't know why, but I am like literally the only one who has broken this stuff down the way I do. Somebody was just like, dude, you're wrong. Peter Schiff is doing it. So is Bix Weir. And I'm like, not in the same way. Both those people are pushing inflation expectations on a major scale, which is absolutely benefiting the Federal Reserve. Now, I'm not trying to accuse them of being on the Federal Reserve side. I know Peter Schiff. I mean, I don't know him, but I've met him personally. He's done an interview here on the channel. In fact, he gave me probably one of the best interviews that I have ever gotten on the channel here. And I really appreciate all the input that he has ever given the world from his insights in his lectures and his speakings. And I have to say that he is definitely the number one economist that I was listening to that literally got me to the place that I am today. And after all that stuff, I have mad respect for Peter Schiff, but I have to say this because it's takes one to know one. He's a salesman. And he's never, ever, 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 ever going to say anything that deters you away from the purchasing of gold because he's a gold salesman. Right. And again, it takes one to know one. I'm a salesman myself, so I know the tactics. It's not like it's not a bad thing. It's not. But to think that he's giving you 100% quality information that's not a sales tactic, no, I'm not going to agree with that. It's all sales pitch, every one of them. It's not that it's inaccurate either, right? I mean, it's accurate stuff. Listen to what Bostic says here. This governor, I'm sorry, is president. This what is he? Atlanta Fed president Bostic. He's retiring here or getting out. I don't know if he's retiring, but he's not going to be on the FOMC, I believe, at the end of the month. This interview, I feel, was like pure propaganda. And right here at this 4-minute mark, I'll go get the link for it and share it. It's on the school community. It's over at the university, the UE University. There's a link down in the description for it. But this is coming out of Bloomberg Television. Listen to this, guys. Yep.
You really have to get out and see all parts of it. And one of the things that's been great in my
Hold
role
on, let me back this up here again. Try it.
here is I've had a chance to do that. I think it's given me a deeper understanding of just how people engage and experience the economy and how they make decisions to move it forward. In terms of inflation, what I've learned is that we really don't want to have inflation.
Right there. We really don't want to have inflation. Really. Because I can tell you from about 15 documents prior to COVID, that was the only thing you guys were looking for. Inflation and inflation expectation, right? I mean, even John Williams, the monetary policy strategies for a low neutral interest rate world, which I have discussed so many damn times on this channel, it states the Fed, ironically, what's up, Bernie?
I screwed up. I got one more cabinet I got to bring in.
Do you? Okay, give me just a couple of minutes here and I'll be right over. All right, bro? Yeah, no problem. Neighbor's been remodeling his house. He's been moving cabinets around, stuff like that. But even in that speech, he was saying that monetary policy, the problem they need to solve these days is the risk of inflation that was persistently too low rather than too high. So when I think about how it is that Bostic says we don't want inflation, I think that's very disingenuous. They do want inflation. They want a 2% target inflation. Like, to him to say that we don't want inflation, that's not right. Right? I mean, even a 2% target, that's completely imaginary. It's not a set in stone number. It just came up from some New Zealand central banker. Most central banks around the globe target 1 to 3% inflation with an average of 2%. There's like the 2% target is just completely fabricated out of nowhere. Right? Nor has the Federal Reserve ever been there. So it's just like why it is that he says that they don't want inflation, that is absolutely inaccurate. They do want inflation. They at least want 2%, if not higher, because they would rather have persistently high inflation than inflation that was too low. I don't know what it's like. The way he said that, I'm thinking, dude, that's not right. Like, you can't say it like that. That's not right, because you do want inflation. You want at least a 2%.
Once inflation gets entrenched in people's minds, it changes how the economy evolves. And it's one of the reasons why I think that we need to keep our policy in a restrictive posture so that we get inflation back to 2%. That's paramount. High prices and the prospect of rising prices really do have a lot of families on the edge. And you all have...
Okay, so important to understand that part right there, right? High inflation has a lot of families on the edge. And I'm thinking, is it high in, like, we're at 2.3, 2.8? Like the previous inflation, that stuff, yeah, that sucked, right? That supply chain breakdown, severing of all that stimulus packages and the crazy inflationary scenario, we're not experiencing that, right? Is it higher than the 2% target? Absolutely. But what is high, right? Like 2.3, 2.8? I don't think this is necessarily like extremely high, like burdening the families out there with all this pain and suffering. The past was. Now, is it elevated? Yeah. Exactly the way they wanted it to be. And they need people to have a feeling of elevated inflation and an inflation expectation to maintain that. That's what he's propagating here, right? All the families feeling the pain. We know that they're feeling the pain of it. And I'm like, at what? 2.3, 2.8? They'd probably be feeling it at 2.0 too, right? 2.0 as well. Anyway, let's go on.
A lot about the K-shaped economy. There are lots of families that are feeling very precarious right now, and that's a source of concern.
Do you think?
Okay, lots of families are feeling precarious right now, and that is a cause for concern. This is what he says right here. Now listen to what he immediately says after this. This is so good.
The economy is becoming...
What's going on? Oh, damn commercials. I'm sorry, guys. And I'm like way out on the edge of my Wi-Fi connection right now, so it's not really picking it up very well. Ah, shoot. That's the Uneducated Economist for a low tech, out of range, not able to finish the video. But ultimately, if you go and you listen to the interview, he is saying that there is no metric for the K-shaped economy, and so therefore he doesn't really see it if it's getting worse or not. And I thought, man, that is gotta be like to say that the inflationary scenario is putting families in a precarious position, right? And then at the same time, like literally within seconds, saying that I don't have a like essentially I don't see that taking place. Like I don't know if it's getting worse. And I'm like, bro, you just said it was getting worse. Like you literally just said it was getting worse, and then followed that up with I can't tell if the K-shaped economy is getting worse. Yeah. And I find this, I'm like, man, this is exactly how it is that people get the uncertainty. They don't know what the hell is going on because this is the type of communication that they are getting from Bostic, who's about ready to bail out. So you won't even be able to question him later on whether or not he was right or, hey, you remember when you said this stuff back in the day? Because he's not even going to be there anymore. Lisa Cook is essentially saying the same thing. Hey, we're like, sitting in a position in which that we may have to keep the interest rates, in this position. And I'm thinking, weren't you supposed to be fired or something? Oh, yeah, that's right. Trump doesn't have the power to fire you off the FOMC. Yeah. All these people who had committed themselves to this expectation that the Federal Reserve's independence was lost because Jerome getting fired and Cook getting fired and Warsh coming on and all this other stuff. All that creates this fear, uncertainty, and doubt and confusion within the monetary policy. None of it makes sense. But when you look at it from the credible threat theory, in which that they are trying to raise the inflation expectation, to raise the neutral interest rate, to move that ever closer to the Fed funds rate, and the economy becomes less restricted, and that's exactly what is occurring right now, I don't know how many other people are going to describe it this way. This is what Bostic is doing, is literally propagating elevated inflation and inflation expectations. We got to stay the course. Got to keep it going. It's a real burden for the families out there. We feel it. And I was like, oh, really? So do you think the K-shaped economy is getting worse? Oh, I don't know. What? All right. All right. I think it's hilarious people block you from your own opinion. Block you? Who's blocking anybody? This is not an airport. Didn't you say Bitcoin was a good investment? No. No. I mean, I don't know if you're talking to me, but I've never said Bitcoin was an investment. Silver was an investment either. How many times have you ever heard me say that those things were speculations and that investments are things that pay you? Rental incomes, dividend paying stocks, leveling up your skills, businesses, stuff like that. Those things that pay you over time, those things are investments. Speculations are things that you intend on selling for a higher price at some point in the future. Right? Speculations and investments. I've never called Bitcoin an investment. Right? It's a speculation. I buy into it. I save in it. Right? If the term investment was dropped, it's not, and it was used misappropriate. It was misused. Right? Because that's not what it is. Investments pay you over time. They literally, like, you get something in return from it, like a check, of some sort. Now, I did say Bitcoin is a great thing to dollar cost average over time for 4 years. But that's not investing, right? That's dollar cost averaging into a speculative asset, if you even want to consider it that. All right. The Fed is beyond late. Late for what? I don't think they're late for anything. What are they late for? Right? The neutral interest rate is rising, getting ever closer to the Fed funds rate, making the economy far less restricted than anybody had ever given it consideration for. And the top 20% of people are killing it. They're not late for anything. What are they late to do? I mean, I understand that if you're in the bottom 80%, like most of us are, then you're feeling the pain and suffering on account of it. But that's like, that was to be expected. I mean, they said that they were going to do that. And there's really nothing they can do to change that. It's going to be that way. Oops. I'm going to give it another couple of minutes here. I'm going to go help Ernie out. What time is it? 45 minutes into it. All right. Imagine that the Federal Reserve just going away. Yeah. I can. I mean, I have imagined the Federal Reserve going away. All right. I got a hat on right here. It says "End the Fed" on it. Actually, my hoodie says "End the Fed" on it too, but you can't see it anymore. It's all faded away. Yeah. But the idea behind ending the Fed has to come with an expectation that you're going to know how to conduct yourself and not rely on a government system to step up and say, hey, man, we're going to provide you with everything that you need. You know, as people are saying, well, how do I get my Medicare? How do I get all that stuff? Wouldn't exist. All right. I mean, you'd have to understand that the United States is not in a position in which that the massive debt issuance that they have gone under would be available for like, if the Federal Reserve wasn't holding as much as they would, who would be holding it? Uh-huh. And this is really where the concern starts to come in, because the Federal Reserve is essentially holding nothing, like they're holding nothing and providing nothing. And so when people say, well, where's the value in this? And I think there isn't. There's no value in it unless you are looking at it for the transaction that it can do, because that's the only value that it really serves, is to be able to perform the transaction. Now you look at it, and I think to myself, you know, it's just like, that is not a good system. The government would not even remotely look the way that it does if it wasn't for this, you know, central banking system that has encompassed the world with the central banking fiat currency. Like, that stuff has never existed to this scale. Now, I know what it is that I would expect from a collapse of the fiat currency system, and that is not going to be good. It is going to be a very painful experience for most people out there, as they are not going to know how to conduct themselves inside of that environment. They're going to look to the government for help, and there will be no help because there is no government to help. That's going to be very dangerous, right? So, yeah, I thought about it. I know what it would look like. And even ending the Fed, whether it happens by choice or eventual just collapse on its own, it will happen, right? It's just a matter of time. Now, can it last for a very long time going into the future? I didn't think it could, but then again, here it is. We're moving into digital assets, tokenizations, negative interest rates. Who knows what can happen going into the future? And with that being the case, I'm not going to say that it's going to end tomorrow, right? And if it doesn't end tomorrow, I can tell you that the inequality is going to get far worse. All right, I can tell you those things. All right, dangerous freedom, us better than safe slavery. Deja Vu says, bingo Simon. Yeah, we're doing bingo tonight, but I appreciate you, Deja. Thank you for being here. Hyperinflation would help pay down the debt in worthless currency, lower the rates, increase too. But government in better place, people are starving. Someone said, current policy practice treats prices as the primary signal. CPI, PCE survey, and market break-evens tell the Fed when inflation has already formed. This is just incorrect. Yeah. No, I would agree. I would agree that their inflation metrics are probably incredibly inaccurate. Right? Now, with that being said, does that change how it is that they are using those inflation numbers in order to conduct their monetary policy? Just saying. I mean, does it change anything about what they're doing with it, with the numbers? Like, we know that the numbers are probably different. The unemployment might be different. The inflation might be different. All these things might be different. And even though we can say, hey, they're different, we should wish and hope and dream and pray that the Federal Reserve looks at those numbers. They don't. They look at these numbers, these other numbers. And then with those other numbers that they look at, they conduct their monetary policy. And then they adjust interest rates on according to those other numbers that they are looking at, not the ones you look at, but the ones they look at. And with that information, They are putting the position of the Fed funds rate in relation to that number that they are looking at. Now, our job is to understand that and how it is that we conduct ourselves in accordance to that. That's the game, right? That's the game we play, because it isn't fair, it isn't right, it isn't going to be like, hey, look at these numbers and then go off of that and tell me what it really is. It doesn't matter. Like that, it's just like, okay, that's fine. This could be the accuracy or the reality or the truth or not. It doesn't really matter. This is the metrics that they're looking at. This is how they're going to conduct themselves in accordance to that. And anything else other than that is not going to give you the information that you need in order to understand where the Fed funds rate is going to be positioned. Everybody else is like, don't look at the things that the Fed is looking at. Look at all this other shit that they're not looking at, and then tell me how they're going to conduct themselves. And I'm like, I have no idea. Like, I cannot tell you how they're going to conduct themselves on things that they do not look at. That doesn't, you go conduct yourself on things that they don't look at. I don't know how they're going to do it. I'm conducting myself based on my understanding of what it is that they're looking at and how they're going to conduct themselves in relation to the data that they are looking at. That's it. That's the only thing I can do. I can't tell them, hey, look at these things and then change the way that you're viewing it. I can't do that. I can only look at it the way they're doing it. All right. They don't react late. They react based on such numbers. They just isn't how the Fed works. All right. I don't think the Fed makes policy based on these numbers. They don't react late or react based on such numbers. That just isn't how the Fed works. I'm disagreeing with that. I think it is how the Fed works. If you know and look at R star, right? R star is the Federal Reserve operating at its potential alongside low inflation and full employment, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean. And R star is very close to zero. So the Federal Reserve had their like Goldilocks economy. The Fed funds rate would be somewhere near zero. 1.5%, somewhere down really close to zero. Now, if there was a downturn in the economy, there's zero room for adjustment. Like 1% wouldn't do it. You can't adjust monetary policy in a downturn if you're operating close to the lower bound of zero. This is the Fed's problem right now. R star is very close to the lower bound of zero. This is a major problem for the Federal Reserve. If the economy was operating at its potential, alongside low and stable inflation and full employment, whatever the hell those mean, the Fed funds rate would be very close to zero, and if there was a downturn in the economy, there would be no downward adjustment to monetary policy in order to stimulate the economy. It would be over. That's a freaking horrible spot to be in from a central banking point of view. If you have elevated inflation and inflation expectation, regardless of the R star being low, with that elevated inflation expectation, you have a Fed funds rate that is now elevated. Now you have an ability to communicate about an elevated Fed funds rate. That communication is so freaking powerful. It's the most powerful thing in the entire world. Literally the most powerful thing in the entire world. And that's from the Federal Reserve's own statements, right? I mean, what was it? Jefferson's speech again, talking about the communication of monetary policies. Let me see if I can bring it up here for you. That one's not online. That one I got here on the computer. Let me see if I can find it. So this is Jefferson's speech communicating about monetary policy, and this was delivered May 13th of 2024. Okay. Says this: expectations became a focal point in academic and policy circles with the emergence of the new Keynesian models in the 1990s as a framework for monetary policies. In these models, aligning the expectations of decision makers, we're the decision makers, in the private sector with those of the policymakers, that's the FOMC, produced superior superior economic outcomes. Mike Woodford, one of the developers of the new Keynesian model, put it this way: not only do expectations about policy matter, but very little else matters. Very little else matters, only the expectation matters. Controlling the view, the narrative, and what it is that people are thinking and believing out there is by far the Federal Reserve's main policy tool. This is how they're doing it, right? Now, operating with an R star that is very close to zero is requiring, absolutely requiring, elevated inflation and inflation expectation. If that was not present in the economy today, the Federal Reserve would be failing. They would be failing. There is no stimulating effect from the downward adjustment of interest rates. It does not work anymore, right? And now we know this because we have researched that from monetary policy strategies from a low neutral interest rate world. And it says, ironically, the problem we need to solve these days is the risk of inflation that is persistently too low rather than too high. The problem that they were facing was an interest rate or a Fed funds rate operating at the lower bound of zero. It says here, what does a low neutral rate mean for monetary policy and the anchoring of inflation expectations? When a recession hits, central banks may not be able to reduce interest rates well below their neutral level to stimulate the economy as warranted by the effective lower bound on nominal interest rates. You hear the problem? This is 2018. They were like, holy crap, guys, if we don't get inflation, we are done. We are done. We're out of the game. We need an elevated inflation and inflation expectations now. Stat. Okay. Says, as warranted by the effective lower bound, this shortfall in monetary accommodations would result in less desirable economic outcomes during the recession and recovery. They're operating at the lower bound of zero, less desirable outcomes. Pain and misery for everyone. In particular, inflation would typically undershoot its desired target during these episodes. The persistence of below target inflation, rates in many advanced economies over the past decade is a testament to this dynamic. You see the problem that they had? This is 2018. They don't have that problem anymore. Problem solved. Right? They want elevated inflation and inflation expectation because the lowering of interest rates does not stimulate the economy. But as long as you have elevated inflation and inflation expectations, you have an elevated Fed funds rate and you have an ability to communicate about it. And the expectations mean everything. This is according to them, not me, them. This is what you learn from the credible threat theory. Those who don't see it will miss it, absolutely miss it. That's why I keep sharing it over and over again for you. You can get all this. Every one of these speeches that I have used, not every one of them, all the good speeches that I have used in order to develop the credible threat theory with highlighted marks. Oops, I just closed it. With highlighted marks, something similar to, let me bring it up here again since I just closed it. Right? All these highlightations on these speeches, they're available for you over at the UE University, where you can go and download those speeches and look for yourself and see where it is that I have highlighted in order to develop the credible threat theory yourself. You should read all the speeches. And this is just a handful of them. Right? There is tons more out there, but what am I going to do? Overwhelm you with 400 hours of research? This is it. I brought it down to about 12 speeches, 12 documents that you can use to understand and see the monetary policy from a working class point of view that has now developed into the credible threat theory, which is so different from what anybody else is going to deliver to you out there because they just don't see it this way. I don't know why. They don't. Maybe it's just because we're working class and they're like, rich elitist people. I don't know why they don't see it like I do. But this is information that I have gathered from the Fed itself, and you can go and research it for yourself and judge it on the merits by yourself, right? Like that's, up to you. You can just take my opinion or not. Uneducated economist. You guys let me know.